Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Cash Flow Positive. I'm your host, Kenny Bedwell, and we're going to be talking about a deal strategy that I rarely hear investors talk about in the short-term rental space. And this strategy I've seen work for a number of people. Now, some of you listening, you've maybe even employed this strategy to get deals for yourself, but a lot of people gloss over this. And I've seen time and time again in very popular markets, this strategy actually pay off big for a lot of investors. And so on today's episode, we're going to dive into this strategy that I personally love to employ when I'm looking for deals, especially in big popular vacation rental markets, or some of you would call them saturated. So let's dive into it. All right. So first off, let's talk about the strategy or the problem that people miss when they're looking for these types of deals. So when I'm going into a market and I'm looking at certain, especially a big popular market, and when I say big popular market, just think of big popular vacation rental destinations. It could be cities, it really could be anywhere, but the popular markets like the Smokies, for example, okay, do we have the opportunity to add square footage or, for Airbnb's sake, bedroom counts to basically increase heads and beds in any of these properties? The number one correlation we have in the data, okay, that's this is indicative in almost every single market, every single property type, is heads and beds can increase revenue. All right. Now, I'm definitely not the one about we're talking about quality over quantity and getting into that debate. And yes, there's sometimes this quality, especially extreme quality, like something very luxurious for something very crappy that can sleep a lot of people. Something very luxurious and very nice is going to do better than the property that just is, kind of crappy and doesn't look very good. But sleeps a lot of people. However, there is something to say is if you have two properties that look the same, have the same amenities, and all else equal, and property number two can sleep two more people, well, guess what? Property number two is going to make more money than property number one. So a lot of short-term rentals find themselves in that kind of camp where they're competing and they have relatively the same amenities. They have relatively the same product offering, the same location, same proximity, the same, hot tubs or whatever. Sure, they're not cookie cutter per se, but they offer something pretty similar that guests can get overall. There's many of the same things. So the ones that sleep more people or have the better ideal bed configuration tend to generate more revenue. Okay. So where am I going with this? The strategy that I find is I look for properties that have larger square footage, but show a lower bedroom count. For example, I was just the other day looking in the Sedona, Arizona market. Very competitive, lots of short-term rentals there, smaller type of market, but still lots of short-term rentals, high revenue potential. However, the purchase prices are pretty high there. It's really hard to find something around $1 million in Sedona. I mean, the lowest I've seen that made sense, that was like a good property, but needed some renovation, was around like 1.2, 1.3. So I found this property, had 10 out of 10 views, had a rooftop, which was really cool, needed a pool, okay, and needed some, updates to the interior of the property for about 1.4 million. It was listed as a 3-bedroom, 3 full bath at about 2,600 square feet. Now, if you go and you look at other Sedona 3-bedroom homes, not a lot of them have rooftops, but that's separate. Okay. They might have pools, they might have awesome views, but most of them are 3.2s or 3.2.5s. There are some 3.3s. Okay. But the majority of them square footage wise is less than 2,600. They're usually like 2,100, 2,200 for a 3-bedroom. And that's a pretty big 3-bedroom home in Sedona. And so when I see those things, I see 3 full baths, 2,600 square feet, I immediately go, can we add a bedroom? Can we do something? Can we put up a wall? Can we do something super simple to just add a bedroom and make it legal, number one, which will improve the value of the home? So we're forcing some appreciation there. I talk about that a lot. But number two, will help increase revenue because, listen to this, if you buy the property at it was listed at 1.4. You buy the property at 1.4 million as a 3-bedroom. The best 3-bedrooms in that market, excluding cleaning fees, are doing around 150 to 160, which if you do the ROI, you do the numbers, you run the math on that, it ain't going to math for you. It's not going to be a good deal. It's not going to cash flow. And we're all about cash flow on the show. So how does this deal make sense? Well, if you make it a 4-bedroom and you buy it at the same purchase price, guess how much 4-bedrooms make? They make around 225 to 250. That's a pretty big step up in revenue. So if that's the case, then if I can figure out the 4-bedroom thing, I actually think I have a deal on my hands here. I just bought a 4-bedroom, but for the price of a 3-bedroom. And this is the strategy I'm talking about. I've seen this in markets all over the place. I just saw a good buddy buy something in Austin, Texas, that now there's a couple stipulations with it, but basically a 5-bedroom priced as a 4-bedroom. And it makes it a good deal because obviously the 5-bedrooms make more revenue than 4-bedrooms. That's more heads and beds, going back to that correlation again. However, with it being priced lower and, him having to do a little bit of, converting an office into a bedroom, that's not that hard to do. All of a sudden, boom, we have a really good deal because the revenue jumps up. So when you're looking for deals, when you're looking for opportunities, I'm always, always, always looking for those properties that have that large square footage, large number of bathrooms, usually equal to the number of legal bedrooms. When I say legal bedrooms, it's what's listed. Okay. Technically, by law, real estate law, the bedrooms listed, the bedroom count listed on the property in the majority of states, it has to be legal bedrooms, an egress window, a closet, heating and cooling, or whatever. Like I think heating, not necessarily cooling, but heating. So with those 3 things in mind, then it's gotten so an egress window for one escape and then a door for another. So 2 escapes essentially. With those, or 2 exits, I should say. With those things in mind, we have, your legal bedrooms, but with Airbnb isn't looking at office spaces and multi-rooms and going, oh, well, those are multi-rooms, not bedrooms. And you can convert them into bedrooms. But with the larger properties, sometimes, especially in like North Carolina, I've seen it in Kentucky, I've seen it in other places, you might have a house that's a 3-bed, 3.5 bath, that's listed at 3,000 square feet. That's a pretty big 3-bedroom and 3.5 baths. There's actually more bathrooms than there are bedrooms. So that tells me that there's probably some additional space in there that I could include as in my short-term rental as an additional bedroom. And depending on the legality of the area, like North Carolina, they don't care. You can list it as a 5, 6, 7, 8-bedroom, assuming there's actually the spaces on Airbnb, and it not actually be an 8-bedroom legally, like as a house that you could list as an 8-bedroom to sell, right? It's 3-bedroom, 3.5 baths in my example here. So I find those opportunities great. But here's the thing that I do that other investors who are trying to do the same thing, especially in like North Carolina and other markets that they don't do, is they don't look at trying to make those bedrooms legal. Okay. Because when you convert the property into let's say you take it from a 3 to a 4 or 5. So you take it from a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom. Okay. And it's legal on Airbnb as a 4-bedroom, but if you go to sell the property or list the property again, are you selling it as a 4-bedroom? No, you can't, because you didn't do the actual, whether it's septic or sewer or whatever, zoning permits or whatever. I like to make it a legal 4-bedroom, or, whatever the bedroom count you're getting it up to. And the reason why is because that helps me gain appreciation along with gaining the cash flow from the revenue bump of increasing the heads and beds. So remember, when you're doing and looking for deals, we're looking for properties that have the I call it the 2-headed dragon, or the 1-2 punch of, we want it to cash flow, but we also want it to appreciate. All right. Now, when I say want it to appreciate, let me clarify, because appreciation over time, if you hold a property for over 30 years or more, it's going to appreciate at an average rate of 3% or more. Okay. Depending on your market, but it will appreciate over time. You're only planning to hold it for 5 years. That appreciation level will be determined based off what the market is doing. But it's kind of like, looking at the crystal ball, which, here's my magic crystal ball over here in the corner that I'm, stroking now. But so the reality is, we can't bank on future appreciation unless we're planning to hold the property forever and ever, but we can force appreciation. We can plan out the appreciation by forcing it through adding legal things to the property to make the deal even sweeter. One thing I am learning, and I've just as I'm gaining more wisdom and experience in the real estate world, and one thing I don't really talk about a lot is appreciation and the value of it over time. A lot of us don't even include it in our performance. A lot of us don't even take it into account when we're looking at deals, and we probably should, because it makes the deal better. It makes the deal sweeter. Okay. Obviously, cash flow is important, and the number one thing we look at, but we also should take into account potential appreciation and forcing appreciation to make those deals better. As you scale and grow, as you scale and buy bigger properties and do bigger things with real estate, assuming you want to do that, let's assume you do, you will be looking less at cash flow and more at appreciation, because that's where you make most of your money. And so that is why I love this bedroom count strategy, and finding deals where I can increase the bedroom count legally from, the Airbnb standpoint, but also from a, listing standpoint, is so I can force my appreciation and get more cash flow. And there's lots of markets that you can do this in. Now, something really funny though, the other day I was looking in the Poconos, and this happens a lot in the Poconos, where we can increase the bedroom count. But the Poconos, in order for it to be a legal short-term rental with that bedroom count, it has to match what the legal septic system rating is for, which is why most properties, like in North Carolina, for example, it might say it's a 3.5, or 4, 3.5. It's got extra spaces, but those extra spaces look like legal bedrooms. But with the septic is only permitted for, whatever, 3 or 4 bedrooms. So in the Poconos, they make you upgrade your septic system. The upgrade's only about $15,000. And a lot of people balk at that. They're like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to pay $15,000 to do that. Put in a new septic and all blah, 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 blah. If you can make $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 more a year just by increasing the bedroom count, then it's obviously worth it to spend the extra money to invest into the property, to improve it from a value standpoint and also a cash flow standpoint. My number one thing that I hope every single person listening to this podcast has taken away, if you've listened to other episodes before, is that you have to invest in your property. You have to be willing to invest into your property. Okay. And I've even gone as far in saying, look, if you don't have the money to invest in your property, number one, you probably should save up a little more. Or number two, go down in purchase price range so you can invest more into the property. Don't overstretch don't over leverage yourself just on purchase price to buy the biggest and baddest thing without being able to invest into it. We should be shooting for top properties in the market, not average properties in the market. I got a really good question. I was on a webinar, a workshop, and this lady was like, hey, I'm looking at STR Insights. This is a live question I got. She says, hey, I'm looking at STR Insights, and I noticed that the average in this market is only like $30,000. And I was like, okay. And she's like, well, like, what do you say that? Why do you think this is a good market then? And I said, I don't look at the average. Like, what? Like, the average is always going to be garbage, right? We're not buying average properties. You shouldn't be shooting for average. The average is going down year over year. If you plan to buy an average property, you will lose. You will make less money. Your property will not cash flow. So if that's in mind, why would I ever look at averages? I'm always looking at top properties. I'm looking at comparable properties. I'm looking at specific things. As Airbnb hosts or short-term rental hosts, we're selling experiences. We're selling unique experiences that is never represented by an average. And we never want to be associated with the average as hosts. We want to be the best in the market. So if that's the case, then we can't look at average numbers. However, that means we're probably gonna have to spend more than the average person in the market to be able to have a good producing property. And that's why I always focus on markets personally where the average barrier of entry is much lower. So when I look at what everybody else has for amenities and what they're doing for their pricing strategies and everything, that can help me determine if I want to invest into that market or not. And this is just another one of my, here's another deal finding strategy, is look for markets that have a lower barrier of entry. Meaning, go on Airbnb, go look at the properties in Airbnb and those markets and see what types of amenities they have. If everybody has indoor pools, if everybody has, 10 out of 10 views and, like 5 hot tubs and 3 barrel saunas and, diamond chandeliers, well, guess what you're going to have at the minimum, right? That's my problem with Orlando Kissimmee. People, I get hate for, oh, well, that's Disney World, all this stuff to do there. Awesome. But you know how much you have to spend just to be the quote unquote average? I don't want to spend that kind of money, and you're not going to make a return there anyway. It's the same thing, the same feeling I have, no offense, but for the Smokies, you have to spend a lot of money. Asheville, North Carolina as well. It's gotten to that point where I can say that now, where you have to spend a lot of money just to compete. What if you could take that same amount of money and go spend that in another market and be the top dog? Like, that's what I'm looking for. And if you could do that and increase the value of the property by adding bedroom counts, boy, oh boy, do you have a good deal on your hands. And there's so many deals like that out there that people pass on because they're just looking at, oh, I see it says 3 bedrooms. I'm going to run it as a 3-bedroom. Well, hey, Johnny, is there room? Is there potential to increase the bedroom count? Can you do a little bit of construction? Where I've had tons of clients where all they do is just throw up some framing and a drywall and put in a closet and boom, there you go. That's all they had to do to make it a legal bedroom. I've had other clients that have gone and updated the septic system. I've had other clients who've gone and literally reconfigure the entire property. I mean, it can get extreme. It can be really simple. Obviously, the ideal world is just go for the simple one, right? The simple upgrade of putting up some drywall or maybe it's just upgrade the septic system and the room's already there. There's so many ways to pull this off. And you just got to be, you got to have that vision, and you need to also understand too, when you're looking at these markets, you need to understand the revenue difference. If I go from a 3 to a 4 or a 4 to a 5 or a 4 to a 6, what's the revenue difference going to be? That might justify the purchase price. Because if I know I can turn it to a 4-bedroom, so we'll take the Sedona property. If you turn that property to a 4-bedroom, not only is it going to do 225 to 250, remember before it was only 150, so we'll say 125. So $75,000 more. Not only is it going to do $75,000 more in revenue, that property will go from 1.4. It'll probably be worth about 1.8 just by increasing the bedroom count. That's amazing appreciation and a pretty good revenue chunk. Right. And when you look at the math on that, actually, you run that at pro forma, that revenue increase of $75,000 is almost a 1-for-1 in cash flow, meaning that you will probably cash flow more money, or that difference in revenue of $75,000. So that's huge. That makes that an incredible deal. Whereas if you just look at it at face value, it's not a good deal. And that's what the 95% are doing when they're going to these markets, especially the popular markets, is they're not looking at, hey, I'm not checking the square footage. I'm not checking the space. I'm not looking at the vision of it and going, what else can I add to this property to try to make it work? When we have a property, and the reason why this property caught my eye, besides the square footage, besides the 3 bathrooms, the full bathrooms, was it had 10 out of 10 views. I mean, the views were crazy good. And then it also had a rooftop, little rooftop deck thing that sat on top. I'm like, man, this would be a really cool short-term rental. Think of the marketing side. That's, when I'm looking at properties, I'm always thinking about that angle. How am I going to market this thing? How am I going to sell this thing? And I'm looking at this. I'm like, man, this is crazy. What are the numbers here? And I'm looking at it. I'm like, they don't really work at face value. Can I make them work at a different value? If I increase bedroom count or, put in an extra bathroom or convert this into this, or if we actually literally build on, I mean, you could build onto a property too. It's all about the numbers. What's the cost to do that? What's the effort and the energy to pull that off? And is it worth it at the end, to pay out at the end? It's an if then. Most properties actually can work out if it's viable to increase or add certain things to the property. Most people just don't want to do that. They're just looking for something that's already already producing the revenue they wanted to produce, which good luck with that, or B, is ready to go. Boom, here's a short-term rental property. It may or may not be furnished. Okay, we can figure out the furnishing thing. But if I just throw a bunch of furniture in there and make it look cute, it's going to make a bunch of money. We got to think better than that. We got to think more in depth than that. And I think that's where you've got, when you're looking for deals, you really have to be looking with vision. You really have to be looking with an eye, understanding the market and the different revenue tiers of, 3 bedrooms make 150, 4 bedrooms make 250 or 225. So knowing those things will help you make better decisions when finding deals. And you'll be able to act faster and more confidently. Okay. And then another thing too, I just want to point this one out. I've been dealing with this a lot. So I'm just going to say it. Putting a property under contract is not a hard commit. All right. I do understand that you could lose your earnest money, but we have a 10 to 14 day contingency period. Now, some states are a little bit different. North Carolina, for example, you have to put some sort of earnest down that you can lose, usually about $5,000. So there's a little bit more risk there. But in most states, like for example, Texas, you can put $100 down, and that's all. I think that's like the minimum that you can lose within your due diligence period of inspections. So when you put something under contract, that doesn't mean you're 100% going to buy it. That means you need more, you like it enough to offer something that you think is worth, but you need more information. You still need to do the inspection to see if the property is in good shape. But I see a lot of people struggling with, especially with this bedroom count thing. I think a lot of people are going to like this idea, like this strategy, and want to play it. But the problem is, the number one thing I hear is, okay, well, I don't know how much it's going to cost to add a bedroom. And they immediately stop, and they're no longer interested in pursuing certain properties because they don't know how to figure out the next step, which is, picking up the phone and calling a contractor and getting a quote, right? But they don't put the property under contract. They don't take the time to do the steps to figure it out, and they never end up with a property or never end up with a really good deal. So we have to think about the buying process as a process, not a one-time event. I put something under contract and I'm good to go, right? We have to think about all the due diligence that's involved. And sometimes we don't have a final conclusion when we put something under contract. We need to think, we need more information. You always need more information anyway. You need to do the housing inspections. You need to get an appraisal. So if that's the case, then don't be afraid to put things under contract. Some of the best investors I know, when I see them in a 1031 exchange, they're crazy. They'll put multiple properties under contract at the same time with the intention of only buying one. Okay. They don't tell the sellers or their agents that. They go, yeah, they put them under a contract, and then some of them even start their due diligence when they put them under contract. I think that's a little extreme, because I would like to do a little bit of due diligence beforehand to feel, regulatory, cost wise, and, to negotiate and have a little bit of negotiating power there. But I've seen people literally put something under contract, then go in and do their due diligence to decide if it's a good deal, because they have it locked in, and I'm seeing a lot of people like spend all this time and energy trying to do all this due diligence and thinking about it. And, let me go talk to my mom and her mom, or your grandma, like your sister's cousin's second removed brother, like whatever, like all this stuff to finally make a decision of just submitting an offer, and the offer still has to get accepted. So another lesson here is, like, when you're thinking about these things, don't be afraid to get under contract and get your hands dirty and then learn on the job. One of the best skills that I think I have is being able to move quickly and pivot quickly. I tell people all the time, like, I build planes like while they're flying, right? Could be a good strategy, could not be. It works out a lot of the times, and sometimes it's kind of rough. It's like, I probably should have been a little more structured on that before I kicked it off. But at least I learned, right? Everything's a learning experience. And if you don't take that step, if you don't make that effort, you're never going to know for yourself, like, was this the right move? Did I do the right thing? And even if it wasn't the right thing, we always have contingencies in place, right? We can always back out of the deals. That gives us the ability to, protect ourselves. But we learned something and we made a move. And that's kind of my lesson for today for you guys is, look, here's a cool strategy. Look for ways to add bedroom counts, because that can only improve cash flow, but appreciation. But then finally, when you're actually looking at deals like these, don't be afraid to make offers, put things under contract, and then figure out if you can actually do that or not. It's the same thing I talk about with the septic upgrades. Okay, cool. You're waiting on calls from, all these inspectors or whatever to tell you if you can legally improve the septic in this area. Let's get it under contract. And we've got 14 days to figure this out. You will know in 2 weeks whether this is going to work out or not. You'll know in 2 weeks, unless you're not going to put in any effort. But why wouldn't you do that, right? So Focus on how you can improve, and which is by taking action. Take the action, take the leap, do it. All right. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Cash Flow Positive Day. I'm not going to do a part two on this one. I think it's, the bedroom count. That's just a strategy I've done. Maybe in the future, I'll bring in somebody who's done this type of strategy before and talk about their revenue numbers. But guys, it is a great strategy to get ahead in a market where everything's expensive, priced at certain bedroom counts. And that's what the majority of investors are looking for. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of Cash Flow Positive.